Every day in UK prisons, prisoners are making homemade weapons, brewing alcohol, and trading drugs on the prison's black market. This is what we'll be discussing today. Let's go! Oi oi Savaloys, welcome back to Beyond Conviction. For those who haven't already subscribed to my channel, if you are interested in prison stories, true crime and the criminal justice system in the UK, then hit the subscribe button. So prisons in the UK are awash with illicit contraband, whether that be homemade weapons, home-brewed alcohol, drugs, steroids, phones. It's all let in every prison in the country and guarantee there is a good collection of those items. So to start the discussion off, the first topic of the agenda is weapons. Firstly, this video is not intended to persuade people to learn how to make these things. It's just for educational purposes, to give you an understanding of what actually goes on behind bars. So weapons, there are so many different types of weapons fashioned out of everyday items in prison. The classic one, as you see in the attached image, is the toothbrush with razor blades melted into it. So what cons would do is they get a toothbrush and they would light either the end or the bristles, and so they melt, and then they break a razor, get a couple of razor blades and just push them in, allow it to harden, and then there you go. You've got a very effective slashing weapon. And the idea is if you put two razor blades side by side, you leave a gap in the middle, and that's intentional because when that is used, the space in between the razor blades, that skin actually gets severed. So what happens is the nursing staff are unable to stitch that wound together because of the gap. So you're left with a very big scar. And I've seen dozens of cons with these scars on their face, and it's usually down to debt or grassing. It's one of the two. So if you see someone with a scar on their face like that, they've had a beef in the prison where they've been suspected of grassing. It may not even be true, or they've owed money and they've not been able to pay for it. So that's a classic weapon. Another weapon as well, which I seen, was the aerials on radios. So they were snapped off and they would be sharpened or forced and pressed to a point, and that can be used as an effective stabbing weapon. Also, the prison issue plastic cutlery. So on arrival, you get a plastic knife, plastic fork, plastic spoon, and the knife, it doesn't have like the serrated edge that you would on a table knife that you'd use to eat your dinner here. It's got like bumps. It almost looks like one side of a kid's pair of scissors. And what happens is that gets melted flat, and then they'll just go on a brick on the wall somewhere, and they'll just sharpen it, and over time that becomes very, very, very sharp, and that's an effective weapon too. Also, another weapon that I've seen used quite frequently was either a tin of tuna or pool balls inside a sock. So that'll be used just to hit people around the body or over the head, and you can actually hear it when it hits someone. It's really loud. It does, that breaks bones. A very, very lethal weapon. It's terrible. Like, people have their skulls cracked and cheekbones shattered from one bite of that. It's absolutely terrible. As you can imagine, getting hit with two pool balls in a sock, it is very, very effective in breaking bones. You put your arms up to defend yourself. You can break your fingers. You can even break your arm. I seen a young lads. We were queuing at the servery for our food, and he got slied by a guy holding one of these weapons, a loaded sock, and he just went behind him and cracked him with it. And as you can imagine, the bell's gone off, and the staff are like cockroaches in a nest, aren't they? They just descend upon the situation and rag both lads back to the pads. But the next day, I seen the lad who got hit with it, and one side of his face was like a balloon. He was unrecognisable. He was like Elephant Man. And that was just from one sly crack with this weapon. It is very, very dangerous. And the intention there is not to give you a little bruise. The intention there is to break parts of someone's body. And that's why it's widely used. The next weapon, which I think is the most devastating of all weapons that you can find in prison, is what is called prison napalm, otherwise known as boiling water and sugar. So the kettles you get in prison, they're designed quite differently to the kettles that you have in your kitchen at home. So you know with your kettle in your kitchen at home, you can lift up the jug from the base. But with the prison kettles, you can't do that. There's no base. The wire is plugged into the main kettle itself. So for you to manoeuvre that kettle, you need to unplug it. And that's apparently a safety feature to avoid weapons like prison napalm being used. But all people have to do, they just boil it, flick it off, pull the plug out the wall and carry it. Very easy workaround. So there's certainly a design fault there. But anyway, this is the most devastating weapon. And I've seen the consequences of using prison napalm twice in the 6 months I spent in prison. So what people do, the boiler kettle like normal, they put sugar in, and this ain't a few teaspoons. This is a whole bag of sugar that they'll put in. And what it turns it into is like a molten syrup. Imagine the viscosity of like honey, but maybe a bit runnier. That's what it's like, and it's designed so if you throw boiling water at someone, they can quite easily, like, if they're able to run and throw cold water on the face to stop the burning process from taking place. But with the sugar, what happens is that stays burning, and you can throw cold water on your face, and what that does, the sugar then crystallizes, but it's embedded into your skin. So for them to remove the sugar from your skin, they will remove your skin too. As soon as they pull the sugar out, your skin's coming off, which leaves you with a devastating scar, and you'll be disfigured from this. It is lethal. It's akin to bloody acid. It is so bad. I will tell you one story, and this was the weekend before I got out of prison. There was one guy, and he's Romanian, and he was in for a bit of a bacon. I say a bit of a bacon. He was in for a bacon offence. It was an attempted R charge on an old lady who was walking to work. This ended up on BBC News on the night before. He's not noticed that the whole wing is going off because of what they're seeing on the news about him. He's not noticed, obviously, because he's still on the wing. If he had noticed on the night, he'd have got on his belt and he'd have gone through the back door, is what it's called. You go through the back door, as in you go straight onto the numbers. So by the time cons are open in the morning, you're not there. But he's not noticed. He stayed on main location. So what's happened was officers went round unlocking people for the line route on the morning. I've come out. I'm on the landing, just finishing off my brew before I head to work. He's on the same landing as me on the other end. And a big gang of, they're just YOs, young lads, 18, 19-year-old, have just rushed him, and all you hear is him screaming. And I look over, and you can actually see the steam coming off his head, and he's on the floor, like curled in a ball, screaming. So I've ran over just to not help, because I seen what was going on the news. I ran over just to have a nose, and his face instantly, it was like bubbling. I could only it's hard to describe. It was like his skin was ready to just fall off his face. If you imagine like camembert, the fried camembert cheese, that's like what his face was. It was like his skin was like slowly moving, like away from his skull. It was terrible. He was quite a dark skinned guy, and his face was white and red. It was grim. And the screams, you could hear when he was getting pulled off the wing, you could hear the screams continuing into the distance. And it's just such a devastating weapon, but it's so widely used, and it's only really used for, like I say, nonces, people who are in for baking offences, like against women and things. In more extreme cases, for grassing, and I've not really heard it being used for people who've been debted up, but I wouldn't put it past some people in jail to do that. That is the ultimate weapon, the ultimate injury you can give someone, because you are disfiguring them for life. As soon as that sugar embeds into the skin, it's game over. Your face is gone. It is lethal, and that incident that I witnessed. The second incident, I only seen it from like a proper distance. I didn't really get a good look, but this will always be with me. Do I think he deserved this? Of course he did. He deserves, a bit of prison justice because the offence he was in for. But the injuries I seen, that image will stay with me forever. It was terrible, but like I say, it was deserved. So that's all I want to talk about regarding weapons anyway. I don't want to be seen to be promoting this sort of thing. They are lethal bits of kit. They do cause devastating injuries, but that's what's present on the prison estate everywhere. There's always going to be weapons because people are going to want to protect themselves. But there you go. That's how it runs. Next topic is going to be drugs, alcohol, and phones. So this is where the money is in the prison black market: phones, drugs, and alcohol. So we'll start with phones. So obviously phones are banned in the UK prison estate because, like, the authorities claim they can be used for escapes, they can be used for organised crime, they can also be used for harassing victims of crime. So that is why they've banned them. But the majority of prisoners who I've met who have phones don't use it for those purposes. They use it so they can call the family whenever they want, so they can sort their money out outside. So if you've got a con who, for example, owns properties, who has a business running outside, then he's going to want to sort that out, and whenever he needs to deal with it. And you need a mobile phone for that, because in prison the phones that you get, which are these big blue boxes, but you also get some prisons that have phone lines in the cells now. When I was in Durham, we had phone lines in the cells. Phone credit in prison is expensive. It is so expensive. I used to spend maybe £15-20 a week on phone credit, and I would only get about a week's worth, just about a week's worth. And it's not even full on conversations. It's maybe 15-20 minutes a day. It's a lot of money. So I would have probably benefited from having a mobile phone. I was offered a phone a few times because I was only doing 6 months. I didn't want to get caught with a phone. So I didn't see it was worth it. But if I was doing longer, I more than likely would have probably got hold of one. But the thing is about phones in prison is they're expensive. The initial purchase is expensive. So in Durham, which is a high security, not a maximum security, but a high security category B prison, local prison, phones are dear. So you can get what's called a CZ long, which is them really small phones, and made so small so you can insert them up your backside, and they're hidden. One of those would be about £300 when I was in. So you'd have to pay someone £300 to get hold of one of those, unless you have a system of getting them brought in. A SIM card was £25. A SIM card was £25. It's an absolute money maker. So the guy selling phones, there was a guy on the wing, not going to mention his name for obvious reasons. He was able to get phones all the time. People used to actually call him EE because he was just always had phones. And if he's selling them at £300 a pop, bearing in mind they're only, 20-30 quid to buy outside, plus the whatever system he's got to bring it in, may have to pay someone off, like an officer or a member of staff or visitor. He's making some good money. So phones, they usually are only the small ones that I've seen. You do come across the bigger ones, like your iPhones and your Samsungs and stuff like that, and they cost a whole lot more because it's a smartphone. Smartphones actually carry, if you get caught with a smartphone in prison, it's almost a mandatory 2-year sentence. With a small phone, it usually only be internal adjudication or a judicial adjudication, where they'll bring a district judge inside the prison. You may get an extra 28 days. But for a smartphone, you can get 2 years for it. So the risk of getting caught, that is why they're so expensive. You can pay $3,000 for a smartphone in prison, which is, like I say, insane. But you only see the real organised crime people with those, because, I mean, if I had all the money in the world, I don't think I'd be spending $3,000 on a smartphone. It's insane. But yeah, phones are a valuable commodity in prison, and they are needed for, like I've said, for people to continue to maybe run their businesses outside of prison, whether that be legit or illegal, to make phone calls with their families without spending the money on the phone credit because it's so expensive. Also, when you're making calls on the prison lines, they get listened to. So if people are wanting to have a private conversation, whether that be about their case, about illicit business outside, or they just want to have a private conversation with their missus or whatever, having a phone, again, is a valuable asset. So that's why phones are sought after, and people are cleaning up on the phones. £300 for a tiny little phone. It's obviously the markup on that is insane. So that's why you'll always find phones in prison. So alcohol. So people ask me, did you ever make alcohol in prison? No, I don't drink. I never really have drunk alcohol, but I've seen the end product, and do I know how to make it? Yes, I do. I'm not going to give you a full recipe because, again, I don't want to be glorifying this sort of thing. And when you make your own homebrewed alcohol, it is actually quite dangerous, because the toxicity of it and the high percentage concentration of alcohol can actually have some serious effects. But I'll give you the gist. So it's known as hooch, and it's disgusting. It stinks. It's, if you can imagine leaving like bread to go mouldy forever for like weeks, that's the smell of it. It stinks. So the way it's made is, because you don't get access to packet yeast, why would you in prison? People use bread, cream crackers. Some even try and use biscuits. So I'm not too sure how that really works. So they get bread, a whole load of sugar, because the sugar feeds the yeast and causes the fermentation. And then what they do, they put hot water in it to sting the yeast, to activate it. And then they'll add, fresh orange, fruit, bits and pieces. And they'll just leave it. They'll just leave it to ferment, like under the pipes, and keep it warm. They'll keep shaking it and stirring it. And you need to, it's called burping it. So you need to, because they'll wrap it in a bag. They'll open the bag now and then to allow the CO2 gases to escape. And the amount of times, only a couple of times I've seen, you can just hear a bang. And what's happened is someone's been making it, the bag's expanded, they forgot to burp it, and it's just exploded, and there's just soggy bread and juice and shit all over the place. So the longer you leave it, the more alcoholic it becomes. And it's not really that sellable in prison because, it's easy to make. But what people do, they will trade it. So for phone credit, I'll give you 2 litres of hooch, or for for this canteen, or for a haircut or whatever, I'll give you, a bottle of hooch. But cons use it just to get pissed, If you're doing 23-hour bang up, it becomes very mundane. So cons like to, have a drink and try and liven the atmosphere up a bit. But like I say, it can be dangerous. I've not heard of anyone go over on it, but it is quite possible. I guarantee it's happened, because it's not regulated. It's not a regulated beverage. It's made very dirty and very cutthroat, so it can be dangerous, can lead to kidney problems and things like that. So I don't recommend just try it. But yeah, that's how they make alcohol in prison. Just basically bread, hot water, sugar, bit of orange juice and fruit, and leave it alone. And within a week, you've got quite strong alcohol. And yeah, so that's alcohol. So the big thing is drugs in prison. And as you can imagine, there is a lot of drugs circulating the UK prison estate. Mainly spice. Spice was the thing when I was inside. Spice, well, it was the thing. It became the thing. It used to be legal as far as I know. Like legal highs. Not legal in prison, but it was legal in the UK. And yeah, spice was the big thing when I was in prison. It was just everywhere. Prisons up in the northeast were getting absolutely annihilated by it. And prisons couldn't do anything. Everyone was going over on it. Everywhere you looked, there was people just like zombies, just off the rockers on it. And to such a point where the Durham prison where I was in, Home House, which was not far away, Northumberland, up north a bit, they all had to lock out because they were just getting smashed with spice and they couldn't take anybody in at the risk of people bringing it in. So anyone who was getting sent to jail, they were getting carted off to Manchester, Hull, Preston, because the northeast prisons were locking out because they were getting absolutely smashed by spice. And what's been happening is outside people have been soaking letters and things in spice and drying it and sending it in as mail. The prisons have copped onto this, so they started photocopying mail and pictures and stuff like that. But what the people outside do as a workaround is they soak so-called legal paperwork into it and send it into the prison as under Rule 39. And that's a way in. So spice is always there. And one sheet, you can get a few £100 for an A4 piece of paper soaked in spice. And it leaves people on the arses. Absolutely insane substance. Don't know why people smoke it. It is lethal. Like, if you can see the effect it has on people, I don't understand what will drive people to smoke it. Like, why would you want yourself to be in that state? Insane. But that's spice, and you get usual street drugs as well, like your weed and your heroin and stuff. But the price is obviously a markup. I've never done drugs, but I know a gram of weed is there about a tenner. In jail, £150. Obviously, the markup on it lifts because it's in prison. It's a high risk game getting drugs in. Subutex, which is a popular one, what I experienced in Durham jail, Subutex was everywhere. And what I know about it, I think it's the real name for it, like the actual name is buprenorphine, and that is it's like a substitute for heroin. So it allows heroin addicts to wean off heroin and use those instead. But what people do, instead of swallowing it, because it's like a tablet, they'll crush it into a powder and then they'll sniff it, and it makes them like gouge out. It just makes them lay on the bed in a bit of a dream world. And that's what it does. And it's very, I'd rather somebody on Subutex than somebody on Spice and Marcel. World of difference between the two regarding the effects of it. But yeah, that's Subutex. A Subutex pill, obviously, they're free out here. If you're not working and you get a free prescription, they don't cost you anything. But inside, one Subutex pill's like £60. And £60 a pill. So if you take a whole box of pills in, you've got a few bob there for you. But a lot of people ask me, like, how does this stuff get in? How does drugs, phones, and things like that get into the jail? And there's stacks of ways. One of the more known ways is through visitors. So visitors will manage to get it through security, get it past the dogs and stuff, and then they'll just slip it. You see it in the news a lot. A lot of people get caught doing it. It's very high risk, because there's cameras everywhere in the visit hall. If you've managed to get past the searchers, to pat down the dogs if they have them on, it's risky. It is very risky, but it happens, And what usually people do on visits, that they'll pay someone to make a distraction to allow the cameras to focus on them. And once that distraction's underway, that's when people's things get slipped all over. If you actually, I don't know who you guys watching it, but if you're ever on a prison visit and you see a distraction go on, instead of looking at the distraction, look elsewhere. You will see people passing stuff, like really sly. And it's quite ingenious, that the Artful Dodger, like, you don't actually... It's like, how did you... Like, I used to see lads bring loads of stuff inside. Like, how the fuck did you get that through there? That's insane. How did that get passed to you? Like, parcels the size of, like, books. Getting, stuff for drugs, phones. How's all that coming on a visit? It's mental. But it does happen, and they try their best to stop it, but you're never really going to fully stop it, in my opinion. It's always going to happen. But that's on visits. Prisoners bringing them in from the outside. They'll be plugged up, full of drugs and stuff. Phones are a bit harder to get in up your ass because you sit on on an X-ray chair. It's called a boss chair, and if you got anything metallic up there, it'll beep, and you'll just be put down the block until you get rid of it or until you hand it over. So a lot of drugs and stuff get brought in that way by cons bringing them in. Cons are sometimes even paid to get recalled on their licenses to bring stuff in. That's how lucrative it is. Drones is a big one as well. Drones bring contraband in all the time because you don't have to go through searches or through staff. Drones just come in up to a window and the package gets pulled in and the drone fucks off. But what I've seen in Durham jail and in Peterborough prison is the windows are all... So not all of them, but most of them are caged off, as in they're sealed. So any drones go up to the window, there's no way for you to get to it because you can't open the window. It's just a vent that gets air in. So a drone will be there, but you won't be able to reach it. And also, the exercise yards, they have a lot of them. I know the E-Wing and D-Wing's exercise yard in Durham has like nets above it because it's very open and it's fairly close to the outer wall. So they have like what they call drone nets. So if a drone drops anything or if anything gets chucked over, it lands on the net and doesn't land on the yard to wait for someone to pick it up. So drones, if the prison has ability to, if it's old, if it's underfunded, if windows haven't been sealed off, if it's a bit fairly old establishment, drones usually are the way to get stuff in. And last but not least, staff. Staff bring stuff in all the time. Organised criminals usually say to them, "Oh, pay your X, Y, and Z. Can you bring in this package? My friend will drop it off to you outside." And so that's how you get the big packages in, like, your few ounces of this and your stacks of phones and your hundreds of pills and stuff. Like them big piles of contraband, that's coming from staff. That's guaranteed. It's coming from staff. And yeah, so they're the main ways of getting stuff in. So I know this was a fairly long video, but I just want to give you an insight as to what sort of contraband you do come across in prison and the sort of ways to get it in. And I hope you liked it. I hope it was informative. But what I want to ask is there anything more that the Ministry of Justice can do to stop contraband getting into prison? That's the one question I want you to ask yourselves. And secondly, do you think prisoners should have mobile phones? Personally, I think they should, because it allows them to, have a bit of normality and not be so cut off from the outside world. But obviously with restrictions, as in approved contact list, and you can only call people in that approved contact list. But I think having mobile phones, I know in Greenland they issue mobile phones to people. I know there's only like one prison, like 8 people in it, but they issue mobile phones. I know Norway are doing, I know Switzerland have started to do it, issue mobile phones, just to give inmates that bit of freedom and that better connection with the outside world and with the families. And I think that is a good thing. So that's 2 questions I want you to ask yourselves and put your thoughts in the comments. Do you think prisoners should have mobile phones? And Is there anything more that the Ministry of Justice can do to stop the influx of drugs and crap like that getting into the prison? Let me know your thoughts. Always be respectful in the comments. And if you haven't already, and if you do enjoy these sort of videos, like it, subscribe to my channel. You'll be notified of what's coming next. Thank you all, and peace and love.